So we've got roughly half an hour, so I'm going to divide that time into two blocks, addressing some initial questions to the panel for their responses, and then opening it out for broader audience Q&A. I'm going to take Chairman's prerogative, and actually we've got some pre-prepared questions here, but I'm actually going to insert one ahead of those. I think we've heard something in several of the talks earlier this morning, which is something that's I'm extremely interested in. That's the whole process of transdisciplinary and transsectoral activity. We've seen numerous examples in the earlier talks about how different sectors are learning from each other and how different technologies spill over into different applications. So I guess my initial question from that is, how do we best go about encouraging that knowledge exchange between disciplines and between sectors? Who would like to have a go at that one?
Well, I suppose as trade association, we of course have to try and facilitate quite a wide variety of engagements with a broader community than perhaps might be the case with our narrow marine hat. And I see some tremendous opportunities arising from the fact that although I might complain occasionally about the way that the funding flows, we have in the UK something now called UK UK Research and Innovation. And what that has done is brought together the various research councils together with Innovate UK into sort of an overarching organisation, which has enabled through the knowledge transfer network to ensure that the focus on a variety of technologies are able to be done cross-sectorally and enable the different sectors to tap into, and this is the important bit, tap into what is being developed maybe in another area completely. Now for the maritime sector, we have it was launched formally in September. We have actually developed our first national maritime research centre, and by having a focus, we've called it affectionately MARI UK, representing Maritime Research and Innovation UK, and that has brought together academia together with some of the key industrial groups. And the purpose of that, having a focus around that area, enables us to engage with similar such bodies around, for example, the Aerospace Technology Institute, the Automotive Propulsion Centre, which of course are taking a big interest in how to green propulsion systems and propulsion mechanisms that currently exist. And obviously some of those technologies are going to be very helpful, in terms of our own sector. In terms of the way we develop, and I think by, if you like, a piecemeal in a sense, but also by the fact that we operate, have an opportunity to engage in these wide variety of institutions, hopefully we will be able to spill and take advantage of the technologies which are being developed in sectors other than directly our own.
I think I'll try to also respond to that question. I mean, there are many things that governments can do to encourage more collaboration across different groups of actors. I mean, one thing that most countries do is to have collaborative grants. Basically, that some part that grants, as a precondition, actors must cooperate with others. I guess that is the case for the European condition and with Horizon 2020, that activities must be collaborative. Another thing that I devoted some time to in my presentation is, of course, the innovation networks, many of which are publicly funded. And again, the entire purpose of such networks would be to foster collaboration. I think it's also important to look at this at the organization and researcher level. Of course, you have to create the right incentives for researchers to actually share their knowledge, which is not necessarily in place today. So that is something that needs to be reflected on. again, really at different levels, government level, organization level, research level. But there are, many opportunities.
I'll ask you to take a stab at that.
I suppose from a renewables policy perspective, I suppose two things. One, I'd reiterate the innovation network, the KTN, have been really good for the renewables sector and Catapult as well, whereby they've stripped away the market-specific requirements and describe it as functional requirements. So they publish quite regularly functional challenges that the sector faces and throw them out, so whether it be the nuclear and their subsea oil, the nuclear industry, or the oil and gas and so on, and that's about transference. And the KTN, we find them particularly good in that regard. I think from a renewables perspective, where we see the lead time is very long, it's 10 years from the map I showed of Scotland at the moment. It'll be the bones of 10 years before those projects are actually operational. So consistency in policy, the return on investment in R&D and diversification and so on is very much linked to policy. So where policy is consistent and timely, I think will encourage the market to invest and researchers to invest in projects to be pooled. So renewables policy, we see numbers changing in manifestos and so on. I think a consistency in policy and through the market helps pull through innovation and ultimately that collaboration.
Can I ask as a follow-on to that then, the three practitioners here, if you like, that are actually doing things in the ocean in these domains, how often do they actually get to sit down with their counterparts who are actually practicing in the other sectors? When I'm thinking of the connection between the oil and gas industry and renewables, between agriculture and those two sectors, there's a huge amount of crossover possible of not just technologies but experience. Does that actually happen?
I think in our own personal capacity company, probably yes, because most of our staff would come from naval architecture, oil and gas and so on. And I think they would always have an affiliation back to their original sector and they kind of encourage and pull through. And equally for us to actually do what we want to do, we need to rely on the multidisciplinary skills. We go to the supply chain and we go to oil and gas tier ones right down the supply chain looking for solutions, and we go to the marine industry looking for vessels and crew transfer vessels and so on. So our sustainability is based on the ideas our guys brought from previous sectors, but equally we need the experience on the supply chain to bring us forward as well. So we go on the front of it.
Yeah. Following on from that, we don't necessarily go direct to the big oil and gas players. For instance, we'll go to the supply chain definitely, and we'll see what common areas there are for the technologies to be transferred. Typically, our conduit through to these other industries would be through bays. So basically, that government department is where we get together as a group, and we have to make quite detailed proposals to them of how all of these industries can live together. The problem we're finding at the moment though is we're ultra deep and we're ultra offshore as well. Oil and gas isn't there yet. Excuse me, they're getting to about 3,500 meters. But as soon as they decide to go ultra offshore as well and go to the depths we're looking at, there's common ground all of a sudden. And I think that's part of the point that we have and problems we face is that some of our circumstances are so unique to us. We then have to work through and work out where there are these common areas of engagement that we can bring together.
Well, actually, I have a question to you in that regard, because I mean, your mother company has a lot of activities. For instance, let's say space exploration. To what extent do you benefit from their know-how in this area?
Yeah, we massively benefit. We put on a lot of the expertise. The intention, and it's I suppose our unique selling point is that we will be able to, for the hardware, for the industrial hardware, the machinery, etc. We probably won't get involved in that as Lockheed Martin. We will outsource that to the supply chain. It'll be the intelligence, it'll be the sensors and the systems integration that Lockheed is really interested in. So yeah, you're right. And we have a maritime division, we have space exploration, and I say everyone that we speak to, very, very interested in trying to get involved in it. It's very exciting, it's a hell of a challenge, but Lockheed are very interested in being involved in this venture.
So it strikes me there's a big opportunity still to explore here in the role of the learned societies, in the role of the professional bodies, in fostering that crossover on a more systematic basis. So that's a very useful point to take forward, I think, from today. I've got about 3 minutes of my opportunity to ask questions, so I'm going to take the first of these questions and ask for each of you, what do you regard as the one key barrier in each of your areas of interest to delivering the future potential of the ocean economy? What's the single thing that's actually holding up progress?
I kind of repeat that point. I think the policy perspective is a vision for consistency in terms of speed, fit for purpose policies in terms of consenting regimes. We've learned a lot from the various oil and gas sectors and from the fixed wind. We talk now about climate emergencies and so on. If we would 10-year lead time to the implement responses, we kind of need more fit for purpose consenting. It's not about throwing all the rules out, but it's about adaptation of what we've existingly done and that consistent pipeline in terms of scenarios for gigawatts that isn't a political football and it's changed all the time. So the biggest barrier to achieve all this is really scale. So when we start, small projects are fine to prove the concept, but the scale is where the cost comes down, we start to see the impact on plans in energy generation, and that's all driven by policy.
So it's driving along that technology maturation curve.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, something very similar. I think as the policy is there, it's forecast and it's trying to predict 2030 forecasts and 2050 targets and things like this. For us, part of the problem, one of the challenges we're trying to overcome is a kind of public perception of seabed mining, because we haven't even started this yet. But the opinion of seabed mining is kind of disastrous at the moment. People don't want to sit and start. So, but it's kind of it feels like it's a necessary evil in order to get us to this greener, sustainable future. However, with regards to things like electric vehicles, for instance. If everyone was driving one, everyone went and bought an electric vehicle tomorrow, there wouldn't be enough batteries. There wouldn't be enough of the metals to build the battery, so we wouldn't even be able to make it work. But if that happened, suddenly everyone's ears would start to tweak, and everyone would switch on to the idea of we really need to make this happen. So we haven't got the urgency because the market isn't quite driving it at the moment. That's one of our biggest hurdles to overcome. It's a very expensive endeavour we're doing, and people don't want to part with their cash on such a high-risk endeavour.
So your challenge is a rate of adoption challenge in a way.
Really, yes, yeah, which is a societal issue really as well.
I guess I would highlight the importance of maintaining and extending ocean observations. We need much more information. We need to maintain the time series that already exists. We need much more data, both in terms of temporal scale, geographic scale, granularity, and I think because we need information to do many other things that are developing now, and to make sure that they are done in a sustainable and safe way.
So it's information to be able to manage use of the oceans as opposed to understanding the oceans. The two is an operational need that it has to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
John?
Excuse me if I have a little bit of a UK-centric approach here, and particularly a frustration which did come out slightly in my presentation in the way that the government approaches the maritime sector. What is clear to me, and as a preamble on that, is that there is a tremendous appetite in the sector to develop new technologies to meet, the ever increasing challenges, some of which will be discussed here today and have already been discussed this morning. And this has certainly come about when we've had dedicated competitions and calls through first the Technology Strategy Board and then subsequently Innovate UK. They've always been oversubscribed. They've always, by the admission of the Innovate UK, been at the top end of the quality in terms of the nature of the projects that have been proposed, and therefore there's been the pain, of course, of the fact that there have been a number of rejections because not enough funding has been put forward for those projects. Now, having made that preamble, my frustration, which I still feel, is that although there's been a tremendous uptick in certain areas of government in terms of the way it approaches and looks at the maritime sector. We have produced the statistics. The latest ones came out in September, that as a whole we're worth 43 billion GV gross value added to the UK economy, employing 1.1 million people, all those sort of things. And in spite of the fact that it's so big compared to aerospace, we don't, when a minister wants to look good, and he suddenly challenges his civil servants to give me something so I can show that I'm supporting science and technology, and I want to give demonstrate this by putting up together a program which will produce something. They will automatically almost go to automotive or aerospace, life sciences, but they'll hardly ever look at maritime, and yet we're so big. And we've also demonstrated in numerous ways that we can be trusted, if I can put it that way, with government support for our technologies. And so my one single thing that I am certainly still campaigning for, and I say this to every chance, in every opportunity, in every forum that I get, is that our sector will be thought of in the same way and in the same sentence as those other sectors, and that we will get automatically thought of and considered when they're looking to put a minister wants to look good. We can give them plenty of photo opportunities after all.
That's a challenge for all of us then. And finally,
yeah, just reiterate a few of those things, but something that I see as a resistance to change, and finding a regulatory system that can define what is responsible use of our oceans and foster that change. I can look at America as an example. 85% of their seafood is imported, yet they have almost zero influence on production of seafood worldwide. They need to make a change, but there are competing interests there, traditional fisheries being one, private property rights on the coast being another, and of course environmental lobbies as well, which some are justified and some may not be, but the regulatory system really needs to take a hold and endorse and foster responsible use of the ocean and ensure we get there in the future, otherwise we just won't change.
I think part of the barrier there, which is one that I've seen numerous times, is is getting over the concept that the maturation of a particular technology is, once you start in the right way, is relatively rapid. But the resistance at the start of that process with saying we can't do this because it's too expensive, it's too difficult, that's the barrier that's difficult to overcome, particularly from a public perception standpoint. I can remember having huge arguments in the early days of offshore wind power that this is never going to be economically viable. So now's the opportunity for you to ask your questions. We've got about 10 minutes, and there's a roving microphone, so who would like to go first?
David Teewood from Southampton again. I think you showed the map of the Earth and said, well, 70% is covered with water. But then, other than the seabed mining, most of the technologies being talked about were still very near shore and very, very shallow water, at least shallow water to the deep sea geologists. When are we going to try and embrace true deep water for farming or energy production? Yeah. Do you think that's possible? I suspect it's probably needed. And completely autonomous systems by offshore.
Yeah, I can briefly respond to that. I mean, you saw the last video that I played, and that's our interest and that's our hope. I come from Canada on the west coast, and there's very much competing title and rights conversations about land and nearshore development. So it would be beneficial to fish farmers to be further and further offshore, to stay away from those kind of political debates. But you can see the technology that we're dreaming about in the future, perhaps running it, as the other presenter said, from shore autonomously, But for us, farming in the depths, reducing impact, and being out of sight from competing interests as well. So yes, we'd like to get there. If I look at the last 50 years of our development, I would say, given that evolution and looking at the graph that we were showing about the upshot near the end, we could be, a decade or two from that reality. I think that will exponentially grow here in the next decade.
I can probably go with that. Yeah, I agree on the deep water and the distance from shore. I think it's something we look to as an industry. I think our deepest project is probably 950 metres. I don't think we'd probably go to the depths of 4,000. That would be way beyond what we'd ever do. But why, as a market, or the Crankin area, where they have high energy needs and low energy production, seems key markets for us. I think on the technology side and markets, that's probably going to open up more opportunities further from shore. We start looking at to get the electricity back to shore is also a constraining cost for renewables. So looking at alternative uses, so we've started to explore hydrogen production, started to come more to the fore, where you produce the hydrogen offshore and bunker it back to shore. Similarly, ammonia, and that the development such as that will start to attach us and push us further and further offshore for those requirements.
My question relates to autonomous vehicles and their spread. One of the consequences of using autonomous vehicles would be that the human beings will be made redundant. So this will improve the bottom line of the companies. They will pay less in terms of salaries, but then these people probably will rely on benefits. So the government have to pay them more. So effectively, instead of getting their money from the companies, they will have to get their money from the public funds. So do you consider this as a risk, or has anybody looked at it, and what could be the mitigation measure that the total is actually positive rather than negative?
That's a hard question. There's a number of people who have written a great deal about this topic. Yes.
Yes, I'm not so sure it is a hard question, because as Ralph has said, I mean, there have been a number of studies of this. What we're saying, and I tried to bring it out in my slide certainly, is that we will need people with different skills to meet the autonomy challenge, not only in terms of creating the systems and in terms of supporting those systems, but also in the way that we look at the jobs that currently exist. So what I'm saying is that the job will no longer be on the ship, but it doesn't mean that the ship will not need some form of telemetry, some sort of monitoring, even with an automated system which has got an artificial brain. How that brain might be adopted is a moot point, and I had a discussion about this over coffee with Frank Mungo, which means that it probably could go on for a considerably longer. But the fact of the matter is I think we should look positively at it and say that we will have different, highly skilled individuals who will be dealing with this technology in the future in one form or another.
And I'd be happy to, not right now, but to point to several very good books on this topic that have been written recently that explore exactly that question, not necessarily reaching the same conclusion.
So, sorry, just to add on to that as well with regards to employment, is our system is looking to be autonomous, but we're a brand new market, so we shouldn't technically be kind of superseding any other previous markets. But one of the areas we're looking at as well is that whilst North Sea gas and oil supplies start to reduce, we've got this business synergy where we can start to retrain people to come into sea mining, subsea technology development, things like that. So we're not seeing it as a purely selfish endeavour. We're kind of trying to see the bigger picture, which is part of why we involve the UK government as well in some of these decisions and see if they can get on board and get motivated about the same things.
If I could just add one final point, what we see if we look further from shore and harsher environments is the risk to life. So we want to reduce the amount of human intervention offshore, so automation and robotics are key to that. So it's actually understanding what's happening offshore and reducing the need for people to physically transfer. risk to life perspective as well.
I think we've got time for one more quick question. Who would like to take that?
Hi, I'm Inga Cresswell. I'm here with Wild Space Productions. I had a question about the autonomous shipping. You gave the example with the red car and how your car was able to slow down as soon as this car started to slow because of this automated driving. And I know that rail collisions is a big problem as we're having an increase in shipping. And I wondered if you see autonomous vehicles, especially within the shipping industry, being a solution to this increase in rail collisions as we get an increase in shipping.
Well, I think we just got, I have no experience or understanding about whale collisions, but I think if we look at it in a holistic way, I mean, it's obviously to have our true autonomous ship, it will need a whole suite of sensors in places around the ship at all heights of the, both below the waterline and above the waterline, for fairly obvious reasons. At the moment, one could argue that in the current shipping environment there is so much so much is placed on the master of the ship and the watch that in fact I see, and I have no experience of going to sea, but I see it very difficult for somebody who is on the top of a 100,000 ton tanker on a bridge to be able to have a complete picture of everywhere, although they do have sonar and all sorts of things like that as well. But I think the whole essence of an autonomous ship is that there will be massive sensor suites which will provide a true picture of what is happening around the whole of the vessel. It'll be there because it'll be demanded, and quite rightly so, by those that are going to regulate such vessels in the sea. They will expect a higher level, if I can say that, of protection, of resilience, if I can put it that way, in the ship than is probably expected now.